Hello, my name is Mr. Silva, and I am your band and orchestra director. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. The purpose of this video is to introduce all of the different instruments that are available for our new incoming music students. Parents, if you're watching this video alone, please press pause and bring your child on over so that they can see all of the different instruments that they have to choose from. This particular video is geared for our band students, and our beginning band class is called Concert Band. So if you have registered for Concert Band, you are watching the correct video. Now I want to take this moment to inform you that there is a difference between band and orchestra. So let me quickly describe to you what the difference is. Band refers to the classes where we teach wind instruments or percussion. And wind instruments would include any instruments that the student would have to blow into for it to make sound. Those include flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon, bass clarinet, saxophone, trumpet, French horn, trombone, baritone, tuba, and percussion. Whew, that's a lot of instruments. And it's okay if you don't know what a lot of those are, and that's the purpose of this video. Now, orchestra is a different class. It's a different type of instrumentation. If you ever hear me say the word orchestra, we are talking about music classes where string instruments are taught. Those include only 4 instruments, and they all kind of look alike, but they're different sizes, and they also play at different pitch levels. Some of them play higher, and some of them play lower. Those include the violin, the viola, the cello, and the bass. And I will not be talking about those instruments. I will be asking you to go on to the link that I provided, and you're going to fill out the survey where you're going to indicate your final choice. And if this survey is not turned in, I will be assigning an instrument on my behalf. At the end of the video, I will also be explaining the process to how I assign each individual student their instrument. It's a little bit of a complicated process, but I want to make sure that everybody is aware and understands how it all works. So here we go. Now I want to start this presentation by showing you this graphic, which we refer to as the sound pyramid. Items that are at the bottom of the pyramid are items that you want more of, and the items that you have towards the top are ones that you want less of. Now, does that mean, and here's where I'm going to contradict myself, does that mean we have to have 30 tubas and only 1 flute? The answer is no, but you have to keep in mind that the tuba is larger than a flute. So even though one person plays the tuba, in reality, it's like having 4 people play that instrument because of the size and how loud it plays. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure you have some experience with sports. So let me make a quick sports analogy. Imagine that you're on a sports team and everybody wants to be, for instance, a pitcher. Can you have a game when you only have 100 pitchers and nobody else doing anything else? No, you can't. And the same is true with our band class. We cannot function successfully by having 40 alto saxophones and only 1 tuba. Everybody wants to play trumpet. Everybody wants to play saxophone, clarinet, or maybe flute. Those are the most popular instruments, and the others get forgotten. But are any of those instruments at the bottom of the pyramid? No. Even if you're coming and watching this video and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I already know what I'm going to play, I don't need to watch this video. Please keep an open mind. I would suggest that you have something to write with, take notes. And if you find a couple instruments that are kind of interesting to you, please feel free to go on YouTube and find more videos. If you need help, please feel free to contact me. So let's begin with the brass family, and now I'm going to go through the different instruments. These are instruments that are offered in our music program. So brass instruments, the sound is made by buzzing into a mouthpiece. So you don't just blow into the mouthpiece and make sound. You actually have to buzz into it. And we do that by making this sound. Yeah, I know it sounds really weird, but that's how we make the sound. So if you were to pick up a trumpet and try just blowing, it would not make sound. You would have to moisten your lips and then make that sound. Kind of like making a raspberry, or if we want to be a little immature, making fart sounds, but we don't refer to it that way. The brass instruments have 3 to 4 valves, and we don't call them buttons, we call them valves. The only exception is the trombone, which has a slide. And yes, there are trombones that exist that have valves, but we do not have those in our program. So the trombone uses a slide. The notes are going to be changed not just by depressing the valves. Yes, that's part of it, but it's also in combination with how you shape your lips. So the most common misconception that I get every year is, Mr. Silva, the trumpet must be the easiest instrument ever because it only has 3 buttons or 3 valves. And that is not true. Yes, there are 3 valves on that instrument, but you have combinations of valve fingerings that you have to use in addition to shaping your mouth in different ways. And I know that is not very specific, but that's as much as I want to mention right now. So let's start with the low brass. And I start with this clip to demonstrate what low brass sounds like. And low brass includes the tuba, trombone, and the baritone. And those are lower sounding instruments. Take a listen to this. So it has a very deep sound, and it's a very important part of our band class. So the lowest sounding instrument is the tuba, and it is, in my opinion, the most important instrument in the band. It is a very important instrument because the tuba forms the foundation of our sound. If we do not have strong or enough tuba players, our band cannot succeed. So this is why I start with this instrument. You do need to have a good ear because the pitches are very low. So if low pitches kind of all sound the same to you, this could be a challenge. If you are a student, and I'll talk about this later in the video, who cannot afford to rent your own instrument, and you know you're going to need to borrow an instrument from the school, I will guarantee you will be able to borrow a tuba from the school. So that's what that means by guaranteed an instrument. And like I mentioned, it is the lowest sounding instrument in the band. And yes, the tuba does require a lot of air, but don't let that scare you. The next instrument is the trombone. The trombone is also a member of the low brass family. It does not have valves, as I mentioned earlier. It does require that you have good hand-eye coordination because you're going to have to move the slide. And there are, like I said, there are no buttons, there are no clicking mechanisms that show you how far to move the slide. There are no markers. You have to start to develop a sense of how far you need to move the slide for each individual note. And on top of that, you also have to combine how you shape your lips to change whether you play the note high, medium, or low. It does require good hand-eye coordination, so I like to present this instrument to all of the swimmer students. If you are a swimmer or you do water polo, anything like that, those students tend to have really good hand-eye coordination. Or if you play baseball, those students tend to also have very good success because of the hand-eye coordination this instrument requires. Tennis would be another sport. It also requires good listening skills. Like I said, you have to be able to shape your lips a different way for each particular note or individual note, and you have to be able to hear whether or not you're playing the right note. Now, I forgot to mention this earlier, but with all the brass instruments, you might be pushing down the right buttons or valves, as I said, or you might be using the right slide movement, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're playing the right note. Like I said, you have to be able to change the shape of your lips to match the note that you're trying to play. It is a low sounding instrument, and I'm talking about the trombone still. It is a low sounding instrument, but it can also play high. Let's take a listen to what trombones sound like. So you can hear in this video that there are 4 trombone players total, and some of them are playing very low, and some of them are playing the main melody and playing very high. Listen again. Very cool music. Now, the trombone case, it might look like a very heavy instrument to you, but it's not a heavy instrument case or instrument in general, but it is a long case. So just keep that in mind. The next instrument I'd like to discuss is referred to as the euphonium. And the euphonium is basically a smaller version of the tuba. It is not a very large instrument, so don't, and by the way, don't let the size of the instruments kind of guide you, to what instrument you want to play. I've had very, very short and very small students play the tuba, for instance. It's possible. We will help you make sure that you can carry and all of that. So just don't let the size sway you one way or another. The euphonium is kind of like a trumpet, except instead of the bell pointing forward, it points up towards the ceiling, or sometimes at an angle, but it does point up. Euphoniums have anywhere between 3 or 4 valves. It is a low sounding instrument. It has a very similar sound to the trombone, but typically the baritone, or sometimes we call it baritone, by the way, the euphonium has a very mellow and more open sound. It's a very important instrument in the low brass. These students, if you like to have the melody in the music we play, the euphonium will often get the melody. Take a listen. And that's a tuba player on the right. I just want to point out that the tuba you see in this video is a full-size tuba. And in our music program at Granada, we do not have full-size tubas. So if you're looking at that instrument in this video and you're going, oh my goodness, that's very big, it's bigger than her, don't worry. We have what are called 3/4 size tubas, which are a smaller version of what you see on your screen. So don't let that make you panic. But if you're thinking, I want to play the tuba, but you're really intimidated about the size, please consider the baritone or the euphonium, which is what you see on your screen now. The next instrument is called the French horn. It is a brass instrument. However, we have now left the realm of low brass instruments. The French horn is not a low brass instrument. It is considered, some people will say, mid brass or high brass because it plays much higher. I want to just preface by saying that this is a challenging instrument. It is not easy. It is challenging, but if you're a type of student that likes a good challenge, you should definitely consider this instrument. In Granada's history, we have only had just a handful of students picking the French horn. There is a need, and I really hope that this year we can have more French horn students. It is such a gorgeous sounding instrument. It is very beautiful. If you're thinking about playing saxophone, which I know a lot of you do, consider this instrument because they play the same music that the saxophones do. And another thing, parents, I hope you're listening. This particular instrument, it's not just a Granada issue, is kind of going extinct. There aren't enough French horn players out there. So a lot of colleges will offer scholarship money if you play the French horn. You do have to have a very good ear, and the mouthpiece that you see there, the part that goes on your lips, is very small and very narrow. And so you need to have what we call a small embouchure, and that E word, embouchure, is a fancy word in a different language that means how do we shape our lips to play our instruments. And this is what the French horn sounds like. Now we have reached the final brass instrument, and that is the trumpet. The trumpet is the highest sounding brass instrument in our class. It is a very competitive instrument. And what I mean by that is I'm pretty sure maybe 70% of you who are watching this video have already made up your mind that you're going to play the trumpet, and that is the final answer. However, do not forget the other instruments that I just presented. The nice thing about making this video is you can rewind at home and take a look at the other instruments again. The trumpet plays the highest notes in the brass family. It does have a light case. It's not very heavy, and it is somewhat of it's not a small case, but it's a medium-sized case. And the embouchure, which again, that E word, embouchure, means how you're going to shape your lips. You have to shape your lips much tighter so you can play higher. I think I mentioned this earlier in the video that even though it just has 3 valves, that doesn't mean that this instrument is easy. It is not the most difficult instrument to learn. However, you do have to have a good ear and discipline to practice every day so that you can be very good at this instrument. Like I said, everybody wants to play it, but I can only have about 8, maybe 10 players in our class to pick up the trumpet. That concludes the brass family, and now we're going to move on to the woodwind family. Now, the word wood is in the word woodwind, but that does not characterize how these instruments are classified into this family. They're woodwind instruments because these instruments have keys, as opposed to the brass instruments that we just saw. The brass instruments have valves, woodwinds have keys. The majority of the woodwind family have keys that you have to close the hole using fingers, but you do have a couple instruments like the flute and the saxophone that do not have holes. Clarinets and saxophones use what we call a reed, which is a bamboo-like piece of wood, I guess you can call it that, and it goes on the mouthpiece. You do have to soak it in your mouth to moisten it and get it ready to play. Moisture is a major component of that, and it only uses a single reed. Oboes and bassoons use a double reed, which means that 2 reeds are basically meshed together. It'll make sense when you see the picture. So we'll start with saxophone, and there are 3. Now, usually our 6th graders will start with alto saxophone because it is the smallest of the 3 that we offer in our class. All 3 use a single reed. Now, what is the difference between alto, tenor, and bari? Well, bari is the most fun instrument. That's just my own opinion. Tenor is next fun, and then everybody plays alto, so that's a joke. So alto would be the smallest sized instrument, which you see in the picture there. It has the highest sound of the 3. And as we go to tenor, tenor is a little bit longer. It does look exactly the same, it's just longer. And then the baritone saxophone, we're going to reserve for our taller 6th graders, or if you're a 7th or 8th grader, I'm going to highly recommend that you consider playing a baritone saxophone because it is probably as big as you are, but don't let that scare you. It is an awesome instrument. Here's the alto. Okay, now we're going to go to tenor, which I said is a little bit bigger. Now, what I like about the tenor is that, like I said, he's playing the main melody to Uptown Funk. It can play high, but he also has that really low, deeper part of the range. And I know most of you probably haven't experienced this. I personally really enjoy playing those lower instruments because when you play those low notes, you can feel it. It's like if you've ever gone to a concert or if you've gone to the movie theaters and there's this intense like scene on the movie coming up and there's that low rumbling sound that you feel from the bass of the speakers. These lower sounding instruments give you that feeling, and it's so cool. So really think about the tenor. It's such a cool instrument. And now we have arrived at the baritone saxophone, which is the largest of the three saxophones. Now, I will tell you that if you need to borrow an instrument from the school because you are unable to rent through a music shop nearby, the baritone saxophone and the tenor saxophone are two types of saxophones that are very easy to borrow from the school. If you are interested in the smallest of the three, which is alto saxophone, priority will go to our sixth grade students who are new to our program, and priority is going to go to the students who indicate that they cannot afford to rent from a music shop. And it will be first come, first served, and we do not have very many alto saxophones to loan out. I'm sorry about that, but that's just how it is. So if you're really serious about playing saxophone and you're willing to play one of the bigger ones like the baritone or the tenor, then that's what you want to do. And this is the baritone saxophone right here. The next instrument is the bass clarinet, which is almost in line with the baritone saxophone, but it's not quite as large. It is a somewhat large instrument, and most of our sixth graders are about as tall as this instrument. It is kind of large, but don't let that panic you or make you worried. It does have either a neck strap that you can wear, and it's not too much strain on the neck, or some instruments, some bass clarinets will have a peg that will raise the instrument up just a little bit off the ground. It has a very relaxed embouchure, which means your lips are not going to have to be super tense to have to play it. It doesn't use a lot of air. I know it looks like it does, but it doesn't. And it can play low, and it mostly does. And like I mentioned earlier, it's one of these low instruments that gives you that low bass feeling, and it's so cool. It's a very important instrument for the balance of the band. It's almost like a tuba, but not really. But it does play low. It's a very important instrument, and it's very cool. Next up is the bassoon. The bassoon is a double reed instrument. And that means that you're not going to put your mouth on a mouthpiece, but instead your lips are going to go around a double reed. The first thing I want to mention is that double reeds are not inexpensive. And I know that's not the most encouraging thing to mention about the bassoon, but that is a reality. And unfortunately, we're not able to provide the reeds, so that is just something to consider. Now, please ignore on the screen it says rental is required. That is not true. Our school owns one bassoon, and it has not been used in a couple years. I'm going to be honest with you. So I think it's time that somebody steps up and picks up the bassoon. Just like I mentioned about the French horn, big time scholarship money. I mean, look at the bassoon on the screen. Just imagine dollar bills coming out. It's a very important instrument for the overall sound of our ensemble. Ensemble is just a fancy term for our band or our group that's going to play. And usually the bassoon plays really low brass, or it plays low brass parts, those low sounds. Again, it's one of those really cool low sounding instruments, just like the bass clarinet, which we just saw, and the baritone saxophone. We've had 3 instruments in a row now that have that low sound. Really cool instrument. I would love to have at least one student pick this instrument up. I will let you borrow it from the school at no charge. The only thing you'd have to do is purchase those reeds. And I want you to pay attention to his fingers. Now, I do want to mention that the bassoon has a very interesting and I'll be honest, kind of a weird fingering system, and so it doesn't make sense like it does with all the other instruments. So I do want to tell you and be honest with you that this is a very challenging instrument. And a lot of music directors out there will sometimes scare students away from not playing this instrument, but I'm quite the opposite. I think we should have somebody to take the challenge and run with it. Like I said, there is a shortage of bassoon players, so if you end up being really good at this instrument, it could mean major money, major scholarship money for you when it's time to apply for schools, for college. So that is the clarinet. It is a very lightweight instrument. Even though it looks like it's a long instrument, it does come apart into smaller sections, which then get put away into a small case. It uses a single reed, and these single reeds are not as expensive as, like I mentioned, the bassoon, and then coming up soon, another instrument that uses double reed. But the clarinet single reed, like I said, is not very expensive. It is a small and lightweight case, and it's a very cool instrument. They play a lot of the main melodies, so if you're interested in playing something that always gets the main part of the song, clarinet is a great instrument. The challenge about the clarinet, as I mentioned earlier, is that it does not have buttons that you push down that, close the keys. They are holes, or the clarinet has holes on the instrument that you have to fully cover. And if you don't, if even a part of your finger doesn't cover that hole, it will squeak, which I am sure all of you have heard a clarinet squeak at some point in your life. If you've gone to a band concert before, we've all heard it. That is the challenge about playing the clarinet. The next instrument is called the oboe, and the oboe kind of looks like a clarinet, but it's the diameter of the instrument is not as large, and it uses a double reed. As you see in this picture, this musician has to wrap both his upper and lower lip around the double reed in order to play it. It is a difficult instrument, but if you're up for a really good challenge, this is another one of those money-winning instruments because not a lot of people pick up the oboe. It's a good challenge if you're willing to accept it, and the oboe gets a lot of solos. It's a very beautiful instrument. The flute uses the most amount of air than any other instrument. Because most of the air that you blow across the lip plate ends up going out of the instrument and not into it. So it uses a lot of air, and they say that the flute uses just as much air as a tuba player does. It's a lot of air, so don't look at this instrument and think, oh, it's super easy. If you know you have a very strong lung capacity, this is a great instrument for you. If you like to run, that might be a good instrument for you as well. Like I said, it requires a lot of air and a lot of control of your air. You can't really see your fingers when you're playing. You kind of develop this muscle memory, as we call it, but that's because your fingers, as you see in the picture, are off to your right. And now we have arrived at the percussion family, and I want to start by making a clarification. Every year, I always get asked, Mr. Silva, can I play the drums? And when we use the word drums, that refers to drum set. And I'm going to give you some bad news right now. Drum set is not an instrument or group of instruments, because it's a drum set, that we teach in this class. Now, don't all leave at once. Okay, I'll talk about the drum set in a little bit, because yes, we do have drum set in our program, just not in the beginning concert band class. You have to learn different instruments in the percussion family. Look at the picture on the screen. Those are just some of them, the major ones. So in the percussion family, and if you end up choosing percussion as your instrument choice, you will end up starting with what we call mallet instruments. Mallet instruments are the instruments that look like they're laid out like a piano. So, and I'm going to highlight, I don't know, hopefully you could see me circling this xylophone that is on the screen, but that is just one of the mallet instruments. Another question I get asked a lot, do you teach piano in this class? And the answer is no. But if you have some piano experience, you might want to think about percussion, because like I mentioned, it is laid out like a piano, and all percussion students start at the beginning of the year by learning mallet instruments. And then as you show me how dedicated and how hard you practice every day, I start to move students to the different instruments. We have bass drum, we have the snare drum. Those are two of the big drums, not big, but the major drums that we teach in the percussion family. Later on, you would learn timpani, which are the drums that we can adjust to change the note that they play. These are melodic instruments. And then we have a lot of other what we call auxiliary instruments. Now, I don't want you to assume, oh, percussion, that's easy. It requires a lot of focus, a lot of attention, and a lot of practice. So just keep that in mind as you consider this instrument selection. Percussion, not drums, not drum set. Now, drum set, if you stay in our program for at least a year and you want to continue next year, we do have drum set as an option in our jazz band, which meets after school, but that is only available to students who are second year or third year students. And now at this time, I will guide you through selecting your instrument choices. Please click on the link that I have provided you, and you will be able to access the instrument survey that you see on your screen. Please carefully read the instructions that I have provided. Enter student first name. Make sure you type in the student's first name. Sometimes I'll get parents putting their first name. Student last name. Carefully select what class you registered for. Parent email, parent phone number, and please make sure that these are contact information that you are looking at over the summer in case I need to contact you regarding these selections. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this survey on this video is so I can explain the somewhat complicated process that I undergo to assign instruments to all of our students. I'm asking you how you're going to get your musical instrument. These options are listed in the order in which students get priority. So for instance, the first option is that you're going to purchase a new or a used instrument, and don't let the word used instrument make you panic. Used instruments, sometimes they work better than newer instruments because they've undergone that break-in process that they need to go through. But please make sure you purchase through a reputable local vendor. If you don't know where to go to, you can ask me. or you can check our website under resources. There's a list of local music stores. But please, please, please do not purchase instruments through Amazon or eBay unless you want a lot of headaches later on. I promise you, you will have a lot of issues in terms of the instrument not breaking on you. Trust me, I have seen it many times. So if you choose that option, your child is pretty much guaranteed whatever their first choice instrument is. The second option is you already own the instrument. So maybe you have a trumpet or you have a violin that you already have in your house. The only thing I would suggest is if the instrument has not been used in a couple years, please have it maintained and cleaned at a local music shop so that we know it's going to work on the first day. Maybe you're going to rent an instrument through a local music store. This means you're going to pay a monthly fee to that music store for them to let you borrow their instrument. So that's a rental. You'll have to look at the music shop list that is on the website, and that's gmsmusic.org, so that you can see where to rent from. The next option is we're going to borrow an instrument from a friend, a family member, or some other source. And again, if you're going to borrow from somebody, make sure you have the instrument service maintained so that it works on day one. Now, these last three options, we start to get into the options where the priority is going to go to first come, first serve, because our school is very limited on how many instruments we can loan out. So be careful. If you are very serious about your first choice, I would highly recommend, if you're able to financially or if you're able to borrow from somebody else, try to go for these options at the top. So now the next three questions, you're going to choose the first choice instrument, and make sure that you choose an instrument that belongs to your class, either orchestra or band. So that's your first choice. Maybe you want to play flute. Then your second choice, in case for some reason I cannot assign you to your first choice. So usually I try to stick with first choice and second choice. Worst case scenario, this is kind of rare, sometimes I have to go with third choice. So make sure the three instruments you choose are three instruments that you will be happy with. Now, please don't choose the same three instruments. For instance, don't do flute, 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 because then I'm going to be forced to choose an instrument that maybe you don't even like. And if you have any questions, please type them in here. And make sure you submit this by the deadline. If you have any questions, please make sure you email me. My email is rsilva@ewcsd.org. Thank you so much for watching this video. I look forward to directing you next school year. And until then, have a wonderful day.